How's it going, everybody? Welcome to CBS Local Sports alongside Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg. I am Ryan Bass. Before we give you our starts and sits for Week 5, what I want you to do, take a snapshot right now of this video. Send it to us on Twitter, at Dave Richard, at Jamie Eisenberg. They will answer your burning fantasy football questions. All right, let's get to our starts and sits for Week 5. And Dave, at quarterback, who you starting?
I like Phillip Rivers a lot this week. I think you can expect Rivers to have a monster game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, the Steelers' run defense has come to play this year, but that pass defense, it's been left behind. Phillip Rivers on Monday night typically does very well. His last 3 games against the Steelers, 3 touchdowns in each. I think you're going to see Phillip Rivers have another big game against Pittsburgh.
Who needs to be put in our bench this week, Jamie, at quarterback?
Yeah, you're looking at Andy Dalton. You know, I think it's just one of those situations where tough matchup. You know, he's been great, obviously, to start the season. Last week, I don't want to say it was a down game, only 19 fantasy points, still was a top 12 option. But I think that's probably his ceiling this week against that Seahawks defense. With Cam Chancellor back, they're a much different opponent. That secondary is going to be tough in that receiving core. They're going to get after Andy Dalton. I think he has his worst game to date.
Dalton was your start of the week last week, and now he finds himself on the bench. Your start of the week this week, Justin Forsett.
Yeah, it's hard not to like Justin Forsett. Coming off that game last week where they gave him 27 carries against the Steelers, he gets that Browns defense. They haven't stopped anybody in terms of against the run. It's now been 7 games in a row where a running back against them has gotten double digits in fantasy points. Forsett was part of that last year. I think he gets it again this year.
Forsett, big week bouncing back last week. C.J. Anderson hasn't bounced back yet.
He hasn't bounced. Yeah, exactly. We haven't seen him bounce big since 2014. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, I have a hard time trusting him, especially after watching Ronnie Hillman play so well. Say, you look at the matchup against the Raiders and you think, oh, it's the Raiders. Go ahead and start him. Well, the Raiders have actually been pretty okay against the run, but I think Ronnie Hillman's going to take C.J. Anderson and put him in a limited role. I'm nervous about using him.
You're starting one guy at wide receiver this week. Who would it be?
Kendall Wright has been very good. You know, 2 of his last 3 games, he's gotten you double digits in fantasy points, and I think you'll see him make it 3 for the season. Buffalo has had a lot of trouble with slot receivers, and that's typically where Kendall Wright lines up. So I think you'll see him come out and get a lot of targets. Had 12 targets in his last game. I think it's going to be a good week for him. Marcus Mariota will rely on him. They're not going to run with a lot of success against the Bills, but I think Wright will have some success catching the ball.
Wright, not necessarily a big name in fantasy. Brandon Cooks is, yet you're sitting him this week.
I'm nervous about him, and we haven't seen him have a good game yet this year, and we haven't even seen him have a decent game with Drew Brees under center. His best game of the year, 79 yards. It came with Luke McCown. The matchup is in his favor. You go to Philadelphia. That's a secondary that's a mess right now. But I like Willie Snead, a good route runner that New Orleans has. I like him a little bit better than Brandon Cooks. I think both guys are more of number 3 type wide receivers.
Who are you starting at tight end this week?
Owen Daniels. And you want to know why, Ryan Bass? It's because he's taking on the Oakland Raiders, and they allow gobs of fantasy points to opposing tight ends.
Nom, nom, nom.
Every single week you've seen them getting double digits. I don't know where this projection came from. There's a 1 missing from that fantasy points total, and it should go at the front. I think Owen Daniels is going to have a big week.
Raiders are allowing an average of 18 fantasy points to opposing tight ends this year. Who are you sitting at tight end?
Heath Miller. You know, he got off to that great start week 1, and then, you know, since Ben Roethlisberger's gone down, so has his fantasy production. Michael Vick is just not going to be a guy that's going to get Heath Miller involved. It's just Roethlisberger, Miller, they have one of those great quarterback to tight end rapports. And now you get Martavis Bryant back, Le'Veon Bell's back in the mix. So those are just too many mouths to feed for this offense, along with Antonio Brown. So I think Heath Miller's a tight end you can get away from.
Those are your starts and sits for Week 5. Remember, guys, send us your snapshots at Dave Richard, at Jamie Eisenberg. Thanks for watching.